So this is where Hemingway irritates a lot of people in his portrayal of women in his novels. Now, in my personal opinion, there are only four major Hemingway novels. The Sun Also Rises, A Farewell to Arms, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and The Old Man in the Sea. Only three of those contained female characters. And those three female characters, I think, kind of interestingly, kind of travel between or represent different points on the scale of Hemingway's perhaps ideas of women. So if you were to read a lot of criticism of Hemingway for his portrayal of women, they'll say that Hemingway's women are either one of two things. They're either independent, domineering, man-eating women, or they're dream girls who are completely submissive to his male characters. And, you know, I think some of that criticism is fair. I don't think that that's entirely wrong. But I do think that it's a lot more of a nuanced picture than that, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today. So the first female character we're talking about is Lady Brett from The Sun Also Rises. Lady Brett was based on a real live woman that Hemingway knew called Lady Duff Twisden, I believe was her name. Where Lady Brett fits in the Hemingway cast of female characters is she is on the surface the prototypical man-eater. She is involved, she's married, she has affairs with a number of different men in the book, and yet she is in love with the main character, Jake Barnes. So throughout the book, essentially what we see as part of the plot of the book is the interplay between Jake Barnes and Lady Brett Ashley and Lady Brett Ashley's various lovers, whether it's Robert Cohen or the bullfighter. Certainly you can read that Lady Brett is essentially a man-eater who's toying with all these men's affection and then she discards them. But I think it's a lot more complicated than that. And I think there's a number of things we have to kind of understand and accept about Hemingway. Hemingway frequently writes about people who have been damaged. In the case of The Sun Also Rises, Jake Barnes has been damaged. He was wounded in the war in such a way that left him impotent. This is why he can't consummate his relationship with Lady Brett. This is why he and Lady Brett are doomed to never really be together, even though they are truly in love with one another. Lady Brett has also experienced some trauma. It's more than intimated in the book that her first husband was physically and emotionally abusive, and that she escaped that marriage, but that marriage left her a little bit shattered. So both these people are damaged. I think that it's important when we think about Lady Brett that we think about her from Jake Barnes's point of view. I think Jake is Hemingway. I think that we look at Lady Brett through Jake Barnes's eyes, and he loves her. He loves everything about her. He thinks that she's wonderful, and we have to, I think, then believe that she loves him too. And so we kind of have this doomed, tragic love story that's taking place. And I think that the trauma of her first marriage and her unhappiness and not being able to be with the man that she loves perhaps explains a little bit about her behavior. So I wanted to read a little bit from kind of the last scene of The Sun Also Rises to kind of give some insight into Lady Brett and who she was. On the surface, some critics would have us believe that she's a man-eating character who destroys men. So in this scene, she's just ended her affair with the bullfighter, and she summoned Jake to Spain to help her out because she's kind of trapped there. So here's the scene. "Darling," Brett said. I went over to the bed and put my arms around her. She kissed me, and while she kissed me, I could feel she was thinking of something else. She was trembling in my arms. She felt very small. "Darling, I've had such a hell of a time." "Tell me about it." "Nothing to tell. He only left yesterday. I made him go." "Why didn't you keep him?" "I don't know. It isn't the sort of thing one does. I don't think I hurt him any. You were probably damn good for him. He shouldn't be living with anyone. I realized that right away." "No?" "Oh, hell," she said. "Let's not talk about it. Let's never talk about it. All right?" "It was rather a knock his being ashamed of me. He was ashamed of me for a while, you know." "No." "Oh, yes. They ragged him about me at the cafe, I guess. He wanted me to grow my hair out. Me with long hair. I'd look so like hell. It's funny." He said it would make me more womanly. I'd look a fright. What happened? Oh, he got over that. He wasn't ashamed of me long. What was it about being in trouble? I didn't know whether I could make him go, and I didn't have a sou to go away and leave him. He tried to give me a lot of money, you know. I told him I had scads of it. He knew that was a lie. I couldn't take his money, you know. No? Oh, let's not talk about it. There were some funny things, though. Do give me a cigarette. I lit the cigarette. He learned his English as a waiter in Gib. Yes, he wanted to marry me finally. Really? Of course I can't even marry Mike. Maybe he thought that would make him Lord Ashley. No, it wasn't that. He really wanted to marry me, so I couldn't go away from him. He wanted to make it sure I could never go away from him after I'd gotten more womanly, of course. You ought to feel set up. I do. I'm all right again. He wiped out that damn Cohen. Good. You know I'd have lived with him if I hadn't seen it as bad for him. We got along damn well. So here's Lady Brett, with a younger man, an attractive man who's apparently devoted to her, but who is unwilling to give up her independence. She's unwilling to change her appearance for him. She's unwilling to marry him because she thinks it's wrong. She eventually leaves him because she thinks it's best for him, even though it's not necessarily best for her, even though I suppose it is. I have a problem seeing Lady Brett Ashley as this kind of misogynistic portrayal of a man-eater. When I think about her as a damaged character, and when I think about her independence, she's not completely independent. Is anyone completely independent? She does depend on Jake, and she does use men, but she is independent, and she will not bury her own feelings, her own desires, her own choices for her life, even in terms of her appearance for a man. I don't think that's a misogynist portrayal of a woman. I could be wrong. My own thoughts about it may be colored by some attitudes that I'm not aware that I'm retaining, but I think there's a lot more nuance to Lady Brett Ashley than that. So the second character from Hemingway's second major novel is Catherine Barkley from A Farewell to Arms. And Catherine Barkley begins A Farewell to Arms by rejecting Lieutenant Henry's advances. Lieutenant Henry meets her when Catherine Barkley is a nurse, where he is admitted while he's recovering from wounds. He tries to woo her. At first, she refuses to do so. She seems to see through him, that he's just trying to use her, that all he really wants to do is have sex with her, that he doesn't really love her. And she rejects him at first. But when she does finally, and I think it's only about 70 or 80 pages in, when she does finally accept, and she decides to go ahead and let herself fall in love with her, she does fall in love with him. She does fall in love with him completely. And that leads to some today what we read as fairly awkward, sappy scenes and dialogue that she delivers, and she appears to sublimate her own desires completely to her love interest, to Lieutenant Henry's desires, and she seems to completely no longer care necessarily what happens to her, but just to want to live through her husband and then the child that they eventually are going to have. This means that I think Catherine Barkley, in the minds of some critics, kind of transverses that time period, that thing from, dominating, independent, man-eating woman to this dream girl character. But I'd just point out again that I think there's more nuance to it than that. It's important to note that Catherine Barkley has herself been damaged. Her fiancé died in World War I, which left her emotionally damaged. She's been a nurse at essentially a military hospital where she's dealt with men shattered, destroyed, broken by war. She's seen her share of death, and I think this has had an impact on her that has left her emotionally, psychologically damaged. And I think that if you, in the book itself, you can see that Hemingway is trying to describe her as a person who has suffered, as a brave woman perhaps, who has suffered tremendously during the war. So I wanted to read a scene from that, from A Farewell to Arms as well. So this is after Lieutenant Henry has kind of successfully wooed Catherine Barkley, and after they have consummated their relationship at least once. By the way, Catherine Barkley also based in part on a real woman named Agnes Kurowski, who Hemingway actually fell in love with while he was recuperating from his wounds, but who would not commit to a relationship with him, unlike Catherine Barkley. Again, this kind of leads to, is Hemingway just living out a fantasy about Agnes Kurowski becoming devoted to him in kind of this dream girl fantasy? Anyway, back to what I was going to read, the scene from Catherine Barkley, or from A Farewell to Arms and Catherine Barkley's dialogue. So here we go. It's raining hard, and you will always love me, won't you? That's Catherine speaking there. Yes, and the rain won't make any difference? No. That's good, because I'm afraid of the rain. Why? I was sleepy. Outside the rain was falling steadily. I don't know, darling. I've always been afraid of the rain. I like it. I like to walk in it, but it's very hard on loving. I'll love you always. I'll love you in the rain and in the snow and in the hail and what else is there? I don't know. I don't know. I guess I'm sleepy. Go to sleep, darling, and I'll love you no matter how it is. You're not really afraid of the rain, are you? Not when I'm with you. Why are you afraid of it? I don't know. Tell me. Don't make me. Tell me. No. Tell me. All right. I'm afraid of the rain because sometimes I see me dead in it. No. And sometimes I see you dead in it. That's more likely. No, it's not, darling, because I can keep you safe. I know I can, but nobody can help themselves. So here's Catherine Barkley, I think, on the surface perhaps talking about and kind of completely devoting herself to her love with Lieutenant Henry. But on the other hand, she's also revealing, I think, how deeply scarred she is by the experiences that she's gone through. It's also in A Farewell to Arms that Hemingway, I think, one of the most famous Hemingway quotes from any of his works of literature comes from, and so I wanted to read that quote as well and kind of relate it to this. So Hemingway says in the book, if people bring so much courage to this world, the world has to kill them, to break them, so of course it kills them. The world breaks everyone, and afterwards many are strong at the broken places. But those it will not break, it kills. It kills the very good and the very gentle and the very brave impartially. If you are none of these, you can be sure it will kill you too, but there will be no special hurry. I think that describes Hemingway's ideas about Catherine Barkley, that she is brave, and she has been broken, and she survives, but eventually it has to kill her. I'd also point out, if Catherine Barkley becomes his dream girl and fits that kind of Hemingway dream girl idea, and therefore her complete subjugation to Lieutenant Henry in the book is an act of misogyny, he pays her back for that devotion, that dream girl status, pretty badly, in the sense that she dies. And it's clear from reading the book that if she'd rejected Lieutenant Henry, as the real Agnes Kurowski did, she would have lived. She wouldn't have gotten pregnant. She wouldn't have died in childbirth. So it seems odd to me that people can say that she's this misogynistic dream girl vision for Hemingway, when Hemingway himself describes her as being brave and strong and essentially has her die for falling in love with Lieutenant Henry. The last major female character that I want to talk about from Hemingway's work is the character of Maria from For Whom the Bell Tolls. And this is, again, another one of those characters who critics of Hemingway and the way he deals with women in his fiction frequently point to and say, well, aha, here is the ideal dream girl. She's young, she's beautiful, she's completely devoted to Robert Jordan in the novel. And she is, Hemingway living out his fantasy dream girl in a fictional form. I think that's possible. He'd already become Ernest Hemingway. He was well on his way to his third marriage. And I think it's possible that that's exactly what he depicts her as. But it's also important to remember that Hemingway's characters are damaged, and Maria is damaged. She has been the victim of a gang rape at the hands of the fascists, and this has turned her into an anti-fascist fighter. She's a part of the loyalist group that Robert Jordan joins, whose mission is to blow up a bridge. She has fallen under the protection of Pilar, and for all of her subjugation, I guess, later to Robert Jordan and falling in love with him, she is, in fact, fighting against fascism. She is, in her own way, kind of an independent woman. But one of the things that critics point out quite frequently about Maria and her relationship with Jordan is that sex with Jordan seems to heal her and solve all of her problems. I don't think there's any doubt that if that's what Hemingway is saying in the novel, then there is a fair amount of some misogyny in the idea that having sex with the right man can solve all of a woman's problems. So there are a number of sex scenes in For Whom the Bell Tolls, at least 4 that I can think of and I can remember. But this is essentially a discussion that takes place, between the two characters as they prepare to have sex for the first time. And another thing Maria said softly, she said for me to tell you that I'm not sick. She knows about such things, and she said to tell you that. She told you to tell me? Yes, I spoke to her, and I told her that I love you. I loved you when I saw you today, and I loved you always, but I never saw you before. And I told Pilar, and she said if I ever told you anything about anything, to tell you that I was not sick. The other thing she told me long ago, soon after the train. What did she say? She said that nothing is done to oneself that one does not accept, and if I loved someone, it would take it all away. I wish to die, you see. What she said is true. And now I am happy that I did not die, and I am so happy that I did not die, and you can love me. Yes, I love you now, and I can be thy woman. I cannot have a woman doing what I do, but thou art my woman now. And if I am, then I will keep on, and am I thy woman now? Yes, Maria. Yes, my little rabbit. She held herself to him, tight to him, and her lips looked for his, and then found them, and were against them, and he felt her fresh and new and smooth and young and lovely, with the warm scalding coolness and unbelievable to be there in the robe that was as familiar as his clothes or his shoes or his duty. And then she said frightenedly, and now let us do quickly what it is we do, so that the other is all gone. You what? Yes, she said almost fiercely. Yes, yes, yes. So this is, again, on the surface, an idea of Maria being healed by having sex with her new love interest, Robert Jordan. And I think if that's all there is, and that may be all there is, then I do think there's a fair amount of misogyny in that. But there are other things that are possible. Maria is damaged. Her rape definitely damaged her. That's what she's talking about when she says, she talked to Pilar about this, and what Pilar told her was that essentially that if she didn't accept that what had happened meant anything, then it didn't mean anything, and that shouldn't prevent her from pursuing a relationship with Robert Jordan. Also important to remember that Maria finds herself kind of trapped in a situation from which she sees no exit, and perhaps to her, Robert Jordan represents that way out. She sees Jordan as a means of escape, both from her past and then literally from Spain. I don't mean to suggest that Hemingway didn't have misogynist feelings, that Hemingway, that maybe these characters are read correctly by those critics who see Hemingway as a misogynist, but I do mean to suggest that there is more to it perhaps than that. There's more nuance perhaps involved in these portrayals of women. I don't think there's any doubt that Maria and Catherine and Lady Brett are all damaged. That Robert Jordan is damaged, that Lieutenant Henry is damaged, that Jake Barnes is clearly damaged, and that maybe what he's suggesting is that people look to relationships and love and sex as a way of healing that damage or escaping that damage. But you'll notice that in none of these books does love actually solve the problem. That Lady Brett and Jake's love for one another doesn't make things better, it makes things worse. That Catherine Barkley's willingness to submit completely to her love for Lieutenant Henry in the end kills her. And that Maria's love for Robert Jordan can't actually save her. Which doesn't seem like misogyny to me. But perhaps it is. Anyway, thank you for watching this really long video. But as always, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments section below.